Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined by my co-host Greg Zumach. Who, we've gotten some prospect action to watch in spring training going already. It's baseball season. Baseball season is happening right now.
We have, and it's a really good thing that we're talking prospects, and we've been able to dive into that because absolutely nothing has happened in Chicago Cubs baseball in the last few weeks, even the last few days.
Yeah.
And so if we didn't have this, we would have nothing to talk about.
There's no notable signings, nothing like
Mm-mm.
that going on in Chicago today as
Nope.
we record this on the 26th of February for sure. Yeah, man, it's been fun watching actual baseball. It's fun. I've had the radio broadcast up at work. I've had the earbud in at work while I'm working, and it's been fun actually having some games to talk about. So we've got a pretty jam-packed episode today. I don't want to spend too much time kind of rambling at the beginning here because we're going to talk a little bit about the prospect action that's going on in spring training, just a bit. And then we are going to talk about the Cody Bellinger signing, but not from the Cody Bellinger side of things. That's not prospect related. We are going to swing it and talk about prospects that are impacted by that Cody Bellinger signing. We'll get into that a little bit. And we'll wrap up the majority of this episode. We'll be talking about the prospects that might debut in Chicago this year. So we'll kind of go through all the names that we might see, the guys that are most likely, and kind of talk on that topic for quite a while. So jam-packed episode. I'll kick it to you first on just like, what are your thoughts about the prospect up to this point? We were 4 days in, right? We're 4 games in. The Cubs are 2-2 in spring training. That does not matter. What does matter is for us, we have seen 41 prospects already make an appearance in a major league spring training game, which is crazy and so fun. It's why it's my favorite, like, pressure-free time of the year, right? Where it's like you get to watch Cubs major league players to start off the game, and then by the end you're watching teenage prospects play in the game, and it's all for fun, and I love it. It's what I love the most.
Yeah, I think it's a ton of fun here because we talk about, obviously we follow prospects all year round, right? But to be able to do it in an environment in which, now I would say that some teams actually will let you have data from Statcast, and the fact that the Cubs still don't is just so frustrating. Probably one of my biggest gripes there. I can't even believe we can't get data on that. But we see these prospects actually play on the same field sometimes with some of the major league guys. They're playing in front of Craig Counsell, and that's going to be absolutely huge for their long-term projection, right? Like, we even saw Jefferson Rojas get in the game. That is amazing. He's playing in front of Craig Counsell. He's not likely to play in the major leagues for 3, 4, possibly even 5 years, right? Like, just with how young he is. And obviously he could just zoom through the system and that'd be amazing. But like, that is such a good environment for them to be able to play in. So yeah, I'm really excited. I loved seeing some of them. I know we'll dive into a couple of them here individually, but I think that just overall, it's fantastic to see the prospects get out there. It's what I've always connected with most in the game is the prospects, and that's what built my fandom. And that's why we do what we do. But it's really, really cool to be able to see them on the same stage.
Yeah, I think showcasing their talents in front of Craig Counsell is the big thing, because you're right. Like, it's I remember Rossi talking about it quite a bit in spring training in the past couple of years, where it's like, hey, like, I don't like, as manager of the Chicago Cubs, they've got bigger and better things to worry about. They're not following the prospects on a daily basis. So like, to put some faces to names, to put some talents to names, right? Like, oh, this guy, I like putting on the scouting hat, right? Like, put on the scouting hat and see what they have on the field is really, really important. I know you want to talk a little bit about Matt Shaw, because we've seen quite a bit of Matt Shaw for a guy who was just drafted last year in the first round, obviously. To be playing as much as he is this quickly for the spring training Cubs is pretty crazy.
Everything Matt Shaw has been doing on it is on an accelerated timeline, it appears. Like, I post draft, and I've saw Matt Shaw as an amateur. I saw him actually in Omaha in the Big Ten championship. I was impressed with his athleticism. I was impressed with his double down the line. Even if you had told me that the Cubs were going to take him, and even if you told me that there were big believers in the organization, that wouldn't have shocked me. I wouldn't have expected him to do what he did all the way up into Double A. And then now, yeah, he's playing and he looks like a player. You don't want to take too much about the results. He just looks like he belongs on the field
Mhm.
with the major league players. And honestly, that's probably the biggest part because he's still going to have some development. He's still going to have some steps, but to not have it feel like the stage is too big is already a very, very good hurdle to jump over.
Yeah, I've noticed that not only with Matt Shaw, but results be damned with Kevin Alcantara and Owen Casey too. They look like they're big leaguers. And with other
Yep.
prospects who Brennan Davis looks like he belongs. Chase Strumpf, I had to put his name in here. He looks like he belongs in a lot of different ways. I think his body looks quite a bit different. Chase Strumpf does than he does in past
Yeah,
years, which
I
is good.
noticed that. Yeah.
There's just a lot of guys that look confident, but also just look comfortable.
And this is not going to be a podcast of like trashing David Ross, who well, love him or don't love him, I would say that generally a lot of the players responded to how he was as a manager.
Hmm.
But that being said, he also was a guy that it felt like you kind of had to earn it, right?
Yeah.
Like i- just because he's battle tested, he's seen like the ups and downs of the game, and different managers are just going to respond differently. It just seems like Craig Counsell has a different vibe. And
Yeah.
and not like better or whatever. I do tend to like that a little bit better, but it seems like the players are just more comfortable with how Counsell was verbalizing some of this. Like the whole concept of I expect you to be nervous. You should be nervous. Like this, I would be nervous. I am nervous. Like being able to show that weakness. Again, this is not here to trash David Ross. I just like what Craig Counsell brings, and I think it's very good for the young prospects.
Yeah, and talk about a guy who's performed that's excited a lot of people and excited Craig Counsell quite a bit is Pete Crow-Armstrong. PCA has gone out and between the blue hair and the double that he had to lead off the first spring train or in his first at bat in the spring training game, um, he is doing all he can to make the opening day roster in Chicago. But he especially, I think PCA especially in interviews, he's been interviewed a lot in spring
Yes.
training, like maybe more than any other player, which is kind of wild that he's being interviewed as much as Dansby Swanson. But he's being interviewed a ton, and he's so composed. His answers are always spot on. He seems to be making a great impression on Craig Counsell. Like everything PCA is doing is impressive.
Yeah, I was actually, I didn't even know if you were going to dive into it because I was going to bring up the way he's interviewing. He is saying all the right things.
Yeah,
And I realize like he will ultimately be judged by his contributions on the field. Like there's no question about that, right? Like otherwise what are we doing here?
hmm,
There's not a game full of press conferences. But that being said, he is saying the right things. This is not a guy who is sulking. This is not a guy who, I mean, I think they kind of described it a little bit like he was a little pissed off about how he did last year.
yeah,
But in a good way, in a like that wasn't acceptable. Like
hmm,
I'm gonna fix what I need to fix, and then I want to stay up here for good. That's the type of attitude you want to have, and not somebody who's kind of spiraling or sulking or getting pissed off at his teammates or anything like that. PCA exudes the type of energy that if he is on your team, you love that guy. You would run through whatever metal wall, brick wall, whatever you want for that guy. If he's on the other team, you hate him. And that is wonderful. There is a history of players that played like on the Cardinals that
yep,
I just could not stand that guy because he didn't play for my team, and of course he played
yeah,
for the chief rival. But even this is like a way back thing. I used that exact analogy when I was on CHGO. I think it was like November of 2022, and I was talking about PCA the exact same way. He still gives off the same energy. Blue hair, not blue hair. I hope he goes like Rodman style, where like every month it's just a different color. I'm not the one who came up with that. I think folks on the 1060 West Discord did, but I'm stealing it for this because I think it's perfect. He exudes everything, man. He is going to be a ton of fun, and I think with how things have lined up based on recent developments, it's actually looking really good for him long term with the Cubs
yeah.
too.
Yeah, I messaged a couple of buddies of mine that are Cardinals fans a picture of PC and his blue hair. I
Oh,
said, you guys are gonna hate this guy. And I love being able to say that. It's the greatest. But I think that the big thing with PCA this spring and what we're watching, it's so important because the Cody Bellinger signing did happen, right? So this past weekend, the Cubs signed Cody Bellinger to a 3-year, $80 million contract. There's opt outs after both the first and second year. And I want to talk a little bit about how that might or might not impact prospects. So I think that the first person that obviously comes to mind is PCA. And I think I'll hit on first that I think that this contract is set up in a way that actually, like, you can tell the Cubs had PCA in mind when they signed this contract, right? Having these opt outs after the first and second year, you can kind of reassess, assuming that Bellinger performs well. You can reassess after year one and say, you know what, like Bellinger's a free agent now. Maybe we're handing the reins off to PCA. But the bright side with Cody Bellinger along the whole way, and we're going to get into this with multiple players, is that like Bellinger can shift to first base. He can shift to right field
okay.
if you want him to. And so I think that while PCA is impacted, I think that he was probably gonna he had a much better shot of making the major league roster opening day this year without Bellinger in the organization than he does with Bellinger in the organization. But I think that the chance is still there. I think he still could make it if he really performs crazy this spring. I think there's still a shot, but there is a relationship between the Bellinger signing and PCA and when we see him in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, right, like, absolutely. I mean, anytime you've got a guy who, the other thing with Cody Bellinger that I think we do want to note here is that the contact structure, while it is really, really good and set up to allow Crow-Armstrong to kind of force the issue, right?
Mhm.
And ultimately be the long-term center fielder, it also does put Cody in a little bit of a spot where center field is still his preferred position.
Mhm.
There is going to be a little bit of pressure. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad teammate on that, but there may be a little bit of pressure of saying like, hey, I do want to play some center field. Like
Yep.
you know, don't just stick me at first base. Like I want to
Mhm.
still showcase my abilities. I don't think that that's going to be a huge issue. And clearly we saw in a showcase year for him, he was willing to go to first base. He was willing to DH. He would have done anything. But we probably are going to still see Cody a lot in center field, probably occasionally first base. The fact that Bellinger can also even shift to the obviously it's the outfield, but like to right field.
Yeah.
Say it's pretty good
Did,
out there, but
didn't
like,
didn't Cody
you
win
know,
the Gold Glove in right field when he was
I
with the
think it was
Dodgers?
in
It
right
was right
field.
field.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep kind of hinting. I keep going back to that right field thing for Cody. I know we're not going to dig in too deep on this, but like it's if you want to give Seiya some time
Yeah.
DHing, you got an outfield of half PCA and Cody Bellinger, 3 Gold Glove outfielders, and
Yeah.
that's
I mean, down
no
the
slight on
stretch.
Seiya. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, there's
it's all there.
nothing wrong with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. I said this one time and I had people jumping all over me. And again, this is not a Cody Bellinger podcast, but this is like the biggest news, right? Like
Yeah.
we got to still talk about this. But I said, and this is what the Cubs have talked about with the multi-positional, and
Yes.
so this will come back to prospects here. But like you can have Bellinger play 50 games in center, 50 games in right field, 50 games at first base,
Yep.
with some DH mixed in there and everybody still gets to rest. Everybody, you have the opportunity to put a like really ridiculous outfield down the stretch or late in games, even like if
Mhm.
you want to. Just get good players. If
Yep.
PCA has that potential and to be a very good player, which he does, he is going to force the issue, and then you just have the best problem ever, which is not really even a problem.
Yeah, let me get out in front of this topic as we're gonna dig into some players individually here, but let me get out in front of this a little bit and say that the Cody Bellinger signing it impacts a lot of different prospects. It does not block a single one of them. It does not
Beautifully
block
said.
anybody,
Yes.
and that is like so important to the continued development of a major league roster with prospects included. Which
Yeah.
I think that I think the Cubs were really bad at that post World Series. Now
Yeah.
the system was also a lot worse. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think that they didn't do a great job of incorporating prospects in the right way, in which you could still go out and sign big free agents, but also incorporate prospects. And I think that they're doing that right now, and I'm loving that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing, and ultimately, like, the team should be aggressive. The team should spend. Don't use this as an excuse. Like I'm not, copping for ownership or saying like this is perfect. Don't spend. Neither are you. No one is saying that. The fact is that the best teams in baseball get really good players at the majors. They allow their prospects to slowly incorporate and develop and force the issue. And when they force the issue, then they invest in them and they make sure that they get a bunch of playing time.
Yeah.
But the ones that don't, sometimes they send them out. And not all prospects are going to work out. The Cody Bellinger signing is really good. It sets PCA up to when he forces the issue, he's there. It also sets it up where not everything is riding on Matt Busch's shoulders.
Michael Busch, yeah.
Michael Busch, sorry.
The amount of times we're going to do that, dude, is unbelievable.
It is actually really good. But like, not everything is falling on Busch's shoulders. Like right now, or up until when Cody Bellinger signed, he was the top offensive guy that they brought in this offseason. That is a lot of pressure, not on only him, but the major league guys. And so, there's that. There's Owen Casey. This is great for Owen Casey.
Yeah.
Owen Casey can come up here at some point and play first base. He's starting to do that a little bit in spring training. That may be next year. This really, really sets things up very well. Obviously, the best case scenario for everyone is that Cody just rakes this year, and then we have the same free agent dance next year, and PCA rakes, and they've got Busch looking good, and then you just figure it out. But point is that this is a very flexible deal. It's a very Jet Hoyer deal.
Yep.
And it's going to be fun to see who forces the issue.
Yeah. So I think that PCA, I think he's in a setup with a situation where if he's performing, he will play regardless of Cody Bellinger. Michael Busch, I think you look at this exact same way. If Michael Busch is performing, he will play regardless of Cody Bellinger. Both those guys are going to be fine. I think the prospect that's impacted most from this is actually Matt Mervis more than any other guy. I think that with Matt Mervis, once Michael Busch was brought into the organization to be the first baseman for the Chicago Cubs, the thought process was, okay, Matt Mervis is kind of the next in line at first base. He will be again back in AAA Iowa. If Michael Busch struggles, if Michael Busch gets injured, if whatever happens, then at that point, Matt Mervis becomes that platoon split with Patrick Wisdom. But now at this point, you bring in Cody Bellinger. Yeah, he's brought in to be the center fielder probably, but he's going to play a lot of first base. And if there's any injury to Michael Busch, then you just slide Cody Bellinger over to first base. And then you probably have Alexander Canario or another outfielder in that depth of outfield as your guy on the major league roster. I think that really pushes out Matt Mervis. There's got to be a lot of chaos going on for Matt Mervis to get consistent playing time in Chicago at this point.
I think that's the case. There's probably, and I believe Brad put this online on Twitter and the Discord, but like, there's probably still a role that if Matt Mervis is just raking, like even if you're just kind of putting him on the bench and letting him come in like great matchups, like, you can probably still do that.
Yeah.
Long term, I have real questions. And the questions aren't whether actually Matt Mervis is going to hit, because I kind of think he's going to still.
Yeah.
I just don't see it for the Cubs. And I think he's the perfect guy to go down to like Miami, Kansas City, like one of these organizations that can just kind of let him go for a little bit, because I do think there's still some really good potential there.
I completely agree. I think that you just give him a long run at first base at your major league level. I think he makes a lot of sense for a lot of other teams for sure. But the Cubs just haven't seemed to believe in him the way that I think a lot of us want to believe in him, He
would be the perfect guy that if you just had a long runway, like if this was the late 2021 Cubs, and you could give him, when he debuts and you give him all of 2022, kind of like Frank Schwindel.
Yeah.
Man, that would have, honestly, I think it really would have worked. I think Matt Mervis came up a year too late.
Too late. Almost exactly a year too late.
Almost exactly a year too late, which is too bad. It's funny. I had somebody tag me online and they're just like, he is going to play for the Oakland A's. And the weirdest thing is that's actually one of the worst organizations for him because they have guys with his exact same profile.
Yeah, they
For
do.
as bad as the Oakland A's are, that's actually not an organization that would be a good spot for him. But there are a lot of good spots, and I think Matt Mervis is going to hit.
But you look at that Oakland A's roster, and there's a lot of guys that get thrown around on social media as like,
Mhm.
oh, you know what? This good team should trade for
Yeah.
Seth Brown, whoever it might be with
Seth
the
Brown,
A's.
Ryan Noda, yeah.
Exactly. And they should trade for them and use them in a very specific way for the good team.
Mhm.
And so like I think if you put Matt Mervis on that A's team, people would be saying that same thing about Matt Mervis. So
Bingo.
it's roster fits. It's how a player fits on a roster. And right now it just doesn't really fit for the Cubs. I think it was tough prior to Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger really just like kind of put it over the edge to a certain degree.
Yeah,
Um,
I do agree.
I do want to talk about a couple more guys that come to mind for me as far as impacted by the Bellinger signing. Alexander Canario basically goes from being the fourth outfielder that probably logs quite a bit of at bats to being the fifth outfielder, and now you're kind of questioning whether or not he goes down to Iowa to get consistent at bats or stays up in Chicago to get pretty infrequent at bats.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. And so there's a great story out right now by Sahadev Sharma. And I can't remember if Patrick Mooney also was in on this. I'm sure he was. I think the two of them were. And they're basically talking about like the implications of the Bellinger signing and what they're hearing. And, I won't share too much of this, but they talked a little bit about some of the roster implications. And while they didn't dive into this too much, I think the fact is that one of the question marks that they raised is the Cubs were concerned that they were getting a little bit too right-handed. It's why they
Mm-hmm.
didn't pursue Matt Chapman, um, I think they pursued him. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it doesn't look like they're going to bring that signing in, and that really got my wheels spinning a little bit with Alexander Canario because I look at this roster and I got to admit, right off the bat, I might put him in right at DH.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think with where things are right now, he almost gives me the vibes of like, I mean, I can understand maybe like Patrick Wisdom or something, but I might just want to let Alexander Canario hit seventh, eighth, and in
Mm-hmm.
the lineup, DH. Don't get on me about roster or lineup construction, please, or where a DH should hit. I don't care about any of that. I'm just saying play him in some good matchups, let him just hit. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that one's still a little tricky. Maybe that he doesn't have a fit right now.
I think Cody might have taken away about 150 plate appearances over the course of the season from Alexander Canario.
That sounds right.
Or so. One more guy that I want to hit on before I'll kick it to you if you have anybody else, but it's more of a prospect guy, and I don't really think that the signing impacts this guy all that much. I just kind of want to point it out. Is Moises Ballesteros is interesting to me with the signing. If Cody, especially, were to stay in the contract for the full 3 years, this is kind of dependent on that because at that point, if you're looking at Cody still on the roster in 2025 and 2026, at that point, he probably will be consistently a first baseman. And so that really takes Moises Ballesteros, who's going to start the year this year in Double-A Tennessee and be based on the bat, based on what we hope with the bat. He still has to play in the upper minors, right? I'm not getting too far ahead of myself, but like that really like says, Moises can't really be a first baseman in Chicago. I had questions about it anyways. But I think it just puts more pressure on Moises to be a catcher long term. And I'm worried about that. This isn't a huge impact on Moises, but I think there is a little bit of implication there if Cody were to stay all 3 years.
Yeah, and I think we have to acknowledge. I mean, I agree. That's a good point. I think we also do have to acknowledge that if Cody is staying all 3 years, then he's probably fallen off.
Yes.
Because his commitments aren't really that high. It's like 30, 30, and 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he's opting into a 1-year 20,
yeah,
it's not really looking super hot. And so maybe that's to the point where he's not guaranteed regular plate appearances at that point.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, look, it's Moises Ballesteros. He's been hitting really well. He made it up to Double-A last year.
Mm-hmm.
He could be in the majors in 2025.
Yeah.
And Cody, having like a good year, I still think he opts out, but like maybe he doesn't,
Yeah.
and that's still totally reasonable.
Hmm.
So, like, he could have Moises Bellister's implications even in year 2. It
Yeah.
is possible.
Yeah. It's not a thing this year for sure. But
Yeah.
is there anybody else you wanted to kind of hit on as impacted by this signing?
We talked about Owen Casey. I think that it might make it a little bit less likely that Owen Casey just absolutely mashes down in AAA and they bring him up. I
They can
think
be much
that
more deliberate with him. Much more
yeah,
deliberate.
I think they're going to be deliberate with him, and I got to admit, I kind of like it with how young he is. I'm always about players just forcing it and telling you when they're ready. But oh man, I'd love to see him just get like 400, 500 plate appearances in Iowa, facing a lot of different off speed lefties with different angles, all that stuff. Make sure that he's not platooned, make it so that he faces every kind of weird, as much as Triple A can throw at him. Because I think in 2025, maybe late 2024, we'll get there in this conversation. Um, I think Owen Casey can do a lot of really good things for you. So I I want him to just get a ton of plate appearances, and then in the case of an injury, he's there.
If there was a prospect, if there was a hitting prospect that I really thought could benefit a ton from a lot of AAA at bats, it would be Owen Casey. I think that like Matt Shaw is not somebody that comes to mind for that. Maybe the opposite. You look at like PCA even to a certain degree. I'm like yeah, I think it's important. Owen Casey is the exact type of prospect that I want to get as many at bats in AAA as possible to prepare him for the major leagues because he's gonna need it. He's gonna face a completely different type of pitcher in AAA than
Yeah.
he faced in AA. It's crafty guys that have been up in the majors already before that know how to get outs and they're not just overpowering fastballs and stuff like that. It's like crafty guys, crafty lefties a lot of times where like
Yes,
that's gonna be
absolutely.
tough on Owen Casey. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to watch at bats. Not watch results, but watch at bats from Owen Casey this year because it's gonna be so important.
It's gonna be the first time he's gonna be seeing, like, 33-year-old lefty who can absolutely dot a changeup on the
Yep.
outside corner. It's exactly the type of pitching that he needs to see, and, yeah, of course, you want him to just feast on it eventually, but I think it'll be an adjustment period. I'm very excited to see what he does.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit tepid about how the automated ball strike situation may end up going.
Yeah.
But hopefully they've made some adjustments there. But I very much want to see Owen Casey face some AAA pitching.
Speaking of Owen Casey potentially coming up in the end of this year, let's go ahead and transition to what prospects we might see debut in Chicago this year. I think we did this last year on the show as well. Um, I always enjoy this kind of predicting who
Mhm.
we might see, how many prospects we might see, who they might be, because this year especially, there's a lot to choose from. Dude. Like the upper levels of the organization are as deep and as good as they've been in a long time. I think even pre like 2015, like or 2015, 2014, 2016, right around there. I think the upper levels of the minors are better now than they were. Obviously, back then they had the KBs and the Javis and the Kyle Schwarbers and stuff like that.
The top
But
end talent was
the
really good.
drop
Yeah.
off was a lot. There was a bigger drop off.
Oh
Now
yeah.
there's just a ton of dudes up in AA and AAA. And so before we get into this, I do want to run through.
Mhm.
I have listed out how many debuts that we've seen at the major league level from after the Cubs won the World Series, starting in 2017 through 2023. And it's really interesting to me in looking at these numbers. I hope that it comes across in podcast form. But in 2017, there were 8 Cubs debuts. In 2018, there were only 4.
Oh
Um,
man.
in 2019, there were only 4. In 2020, the COVID shortened year, there were only 2. So those
Sure.
are kind
Yeah.
of like
That's
peak competitive years, right? That's
yeah.
that's post World Series. The Cubs are going for it, not all that differently in the way they're going for it now. It's a little bit different, but it's they're going for it in the same way. Then 2021 hits, and they're going for it at the beginning of the year, but then you get the sell off. So then by default, you're going to get a lot of prospect debuts. In 2021, you had 15 debuts, which is an outrageous number, only to be outdone in 2022 by 17 debuts at the major league level. And then last year, once the Cubs got even a little bit better, they're only 7. So those really lean years where there's not a whole lot of talent, it was 15 and 17. But really, you're looking at like 2018, 2019 was 4. The high end in 2017 of those like competitive years is 8. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm kind of looking at in terms of the number of
I think
debuts
so
we see
too.
this year. Maybe towards the higher end, maybe closer to 8 than 4, because there's more top end talent in Double A and Triple A. But I think that we should not expect double digit debuts this year as far as prospects go.
No, I don't think so either. Okay, now this is somewhat tangential, but not really. This is exactly what we're talking about. But it's got me thinking about who the debuts were in 2020. And I know Braylon. Who was the other one?
In 2020, so you got so Brennen Marquez, and the other
Yeah.
one is no longer in the organization.
Okay. Can you tell me a position?
He debuted as a starting pitcher. And I think that he probably got, I don't know. He played as a starting pitcher and a relief pitcher for the Cubs during his time within the organization.
Oh, man, I know Steele got called up and obviously wouldn't fit your criteria, but never made an appearance, so he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't count. Brennan Little was the next year, and he wasn't a starter for the Cubs. Oh my God, this.
What
Go
if I
for
give
it.
you the? I'm not going to give you the player. I'm gonna give you the guy that I just associate 1-2 with this
Okay.
guy.
Okay.
Corey Abbott I associate Corey Abbott with this other guy, with the guy who debuted in 2020.
Oh, you know what? I still don't have it because Corey Abbott was actually the guy I was just thinking of.
Tyson Miller. Tyson Miller debuted in
Tyson
2020.
Miller.
I
Yes.
believe he
Okay.
started the
Thank
game
you.
in LA, wasn't he? He started the game in LA against the Dodgers.
Yeah, he did, and I think that looking back on it, this regime would have done things differently with that arm angle
Yeah.
and actually had some more success with him. Tyson Miller,
Tyson
thank
Miller,
you.
Braylon Marquez. That's a couple names in 2020.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
crazy. All right. Well, that's good. Okay, so now bringing it to 2024.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So
Are we
what's
predicting our
kind of like,
number
I guess, what
first?
position? I think relievers are
Yep.
probably the first place you go, right? You're gonna
Yep.
get reliever debuts no matter what. Like that happens because there's such turnover in terms of injuries and just like not players not performing well in relief. There's going to be some relievers called up, and there's some good relievers or starting pitchers that can be relievers in
Yep.
Chicago that are available to choose from. Um, I guess I'll lead this off here because a name really stands out. Ben Brown
Yeah,
stands
go
out to
for
me.
it.
I think that Ben Brown is an absolute lock to debut in Chicago this year. My guess is that Ben Brown debuts as a reliever and spends the 2024 season as a reliever. But I would expect him to start off the year, obviously, in AAA in the starting rotation. I think I've said it on I don't know what show it was on. Maybe it was on this podcast. I don't know. I was on some show recently, and I said that I see Ben Brown following the Justin Steele path. Not
Yep.
he's going to be a Cy Young candidate in a few years, but in terms of being worked as a starting pitcher, being called up, working as a reliever for a decent amount of time, only to be reworked back as a starter in 2025, probably in 2026. But Ben Brown I think the stuff is nasty enough and he's already on the 40-man roster. I think that he's a pretty safe bet to be a 2024 MLB debut.
I agree. The first name that stuck out with me, I wasn't thinking about Ben Brown, but I would totally echo that. The first name that stuck out to me is Bailey Horn.
Bailey Horn
I
too.
think that
Same
Bailey Horn
situation.
makes absolutely. I think Bailey Horn makes his debut this year. I would be really surprised if he doesn't actually.
Yeah, another 40-man roster guy, another
Yep.
guy that I've kind of highlighted the fact that Bailey Horn's path has been so interesting, where he's since he's come in the Cubs organization, he goes to an affiliate, he goes to High A, and he struggles, and then the next year he gets reassigned to High A and he kills it, only to be promoted up to Double A where he struggles. Then he ends the year there and he gets reassigned back to Double A, kills it the next year, and then gets promoted to Iowa, which is what last year he killed it in Tennessee, was promoted up to Iowa, and he struggled pretty bad during his time with the Iowa Cubs in AAA last year. So that only means this year, if he's following the same path that he's been over the past few years, this year he will go back to Iowa. He'll absolutely kill it and deserve a promotion up to Chicago, where he might struggle if he's still following the same trend, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think his assignment to AAA Iowa to start off this year is going to go terrific. I'm really excited to see him absolutely shove in the Iowa bullpen.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really great call. Certainly.
Any other relievers that you kind of have your eye on? There's a few that I have my eye on. I'm gonna I have one more prediction in terms of reliever that
Okay.
I think will debut.
Go for your prediction, because I do have a couple guys that I've been thinking about, but I'm curious if they happen to overlap with where I'm going.
So I have the one guy that I'm going to predict here is a guy that I think could make an impact long term in
Mhm.
Chicago. Zach Lee, I think we
Yeah,
might see in
that's where
Chicago
I was
this year.
going. Yep.
He'll probably be assigned to Double A Tennessee to start off the year, I would guess. But I also like I wouldn't be shocked to see him in Iowa. That wouldn't shock me at all. I think he will get some time in Iowa pretty soon. Uh, he's not been healthy all the time, but when he has been healthy, he's been really good. Last year, to end the year, Zach Lee was tremendous to end the season last year in Double A Tennessee. So, yeah, I think that the stuff is absolutely good enough to make it to Chicago. I think if he's healthy, as long as he's healthy, I think we do see him in Chicago this year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. He was the next one I was going to. I will toss out a fourth one to consider because,
Okay.
like Zach Lee, uh, Riley Martin will also be Rule 5 eligible at the end of this year,
Yep.
and I could see them needing a left-handed reliever.
Yep.
I just, especially in like September, add him to the 40 man. Yeah, you risk like losing these guys. They've really liked what they've seen from Riley Martin. I think he like several of the AAA relievers just kind of got bit by the automated ball strike zone. The walks crept up. The stuff still looks pretty good. It's fastball sweeper. He's got a couple other pitches in there, but that's kind of the bulk of his repertoire. It works really well against
I
lefties.
was Yeah, so I was really interested. So last year, I went back and looked at his splits last year because
Yep.
so in 2022, he was fastball curveball.
Hmm.
And the splits were pretty neutral. Like he was
Yeah.
righties were OPSing almost identical to what lefties were OPSing against them. And so then they incorporated last year that sweeper into the mix to get lefties out at an even higher rate than he already was. And he still put up pretty like neutral splits against righties and
Hmm.
lefties, which was really surprising. Which is a good thing. Like that's a good thing that he's getting righties and lefties out because you don't want a really high OPS against righties, really low against lefties. Loogies don't. I mean, they still exist to a certain degree, but like not like they used to, obviously.
Yeah. Can't
Um,
make a career out of it, really.
yeah, exactly. So it's good that he's the splits are neutral. But I would like to see him still getting more lefties out. I want that OPS against lefties to creep down closer to 600 than 750.
Yeah, and
Um,
you just want to see like him define some sort of role.
yes.
And I think he can. The sweeper is fairly new to his arsenal, and he's got like kind of that fastball property that metrics that the Cubs tend to like. And
Hmm.
yeah, I just think he fits in as one of those guys where he's not your top lefty guy, but he just consistently carves out a role every single year, whether it's for the Cubs or somebody else. I think he's a guy that we just see at some point in Chicago, even if it's just as an up and down reliever. There's a lot of benefit in that.
What are your thoughts on recently 40-man rostered Porter Hodge making his MLB debut?
It's certainly possible. I don't really know what they're doing if they're going to develop him as a starter or reliever this year. I can share this that as of when I talked to Porter in January, Porter did not know.
Mhm.
I'm sure that there's been some more conversations recently, and maybe I can check in on that for the upcoming article that I've got with him. But I don't really know what they're doing with him. I could see him being up in Chicago because he's
Mhm.
40-man rosterable. Um, it's really good to just kind of do some of these up and down relievers. I guess I don't want to go too far into the prospects and make too many guesses that all the relievers will be prospects that they bring up
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
have a big staple of guys in AAA that or look like they're going to be in AAA. They probably have opt outs and they're going to get, these vet relievers. They're going to probably get first dibs on some of this, these opportunities. Not that the Cubs are punting. They're going to take the best guys, but they're also going to try to keep people in the organization. And so, yeah, I'll say we don't see Porter this year, though I hope we do because I hope that
Yeah.
splitter really takes off.
So I'm gonna stick with as far as like my predictions, as far as relievers go. I've still got Ben Brown, Bailey Horn, Zach Lee are my three locks. I also want to throw in one name I have a laundry list of guys that are either older, they've been in the organization longer, they just need something to click, but they might be good options to be called up and then outrighted off the 40-man roster and kept in the organization, because we always see
Okay.
something like that. A lot of
Yep.
times it's the vets that are signed that have already debuted in the major leagues for a different team. But I think that we might see that from one prospect this year, because right now, like, the Cubs have a lot of guys in AAA and AA that are older that I just kind of believe in because I trust the pitching development in this organization, they've not always put up the best stats in the minor leagues, but I still kind of like there's something there that I could see them getting called up to the big league. So I'm going to run through some of these names and just say that I think one of these guys does get brought up and added to the major league roster this year. I've got Cam Sanders is a
Yeah.
name for sure. Chris Clark is a guy that was
Mhm.
a swingman a lot of last year, but I think as a reliever he would make a lot of sense. Um, Eduardo Nunez is another name that I want to throw into this mix for sure. Hunter Biggie, who we've already seen in 2
Yeah.
spring training games. I think Hunter Biggie makes a
Looked
lot of
really
sense
good.
in that role. And then the last one I've got is Blake Whitney, who Blake Whitney is definitely an older guy in the organization, like almost past prospect like status. But like that's a guy that he's still in the organization. He put up great numbers last year. Granted, a lot older than the level that he was playing at, but like I could absolutely see them saying, you know what? I dig this changeup. Let's see if we can get 2 outings of this changeup out of Blake
Yeah.
Whitney at the major league level, and then let's outright him off the 40-man roster. Keep him in the organization because we really like him in the organization, but like not as a player to keep up in Chicago, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, it absolutely makes sense. I mean, we've seen that. We've seen like Brendan Little. That is that kind of idea.
Yes, exactly.
He got brought up as what's really interesting is so he got brought up. He's never added to the 40 man because he was
Hmm.
brought up in a doubleheader.
Yeah.
And I could see a situation where like one of these guys is brought up, never actually put on the 40
Yep.
man, and then sent back down for these. I'm gonna ask a question, and I haven't super been paying attention to this, though I think we've been getting some intel from Arizona. But could we see like a phoenix from the ashes, Jack Patterson,
I,
get a debut and just come up in one of those like double headers and sent back down type of a situation, because I am here for it.
Brother, I tweeted out the other day that if Brennan Davis is successful this year, I'll be miserable online. If Jack Patterson does anything this year, I'm gonna be miserable online. I am gonna like people are gonna be so pissed that I'm talking about Jack Patterson all the time. If he debuts in Chicago,
Yeah,
if he makes his debut, I
gotta drive out
I'm
there, man.
I'm hosting we're gonna have an emergency podcast only for the Jack Patterson debut, and it's gonna be glorious.
Yeah, I think it would just be really a very very cool thing. I also think it would just be a generally very cool thing for the Cubs to do,
Yes, I agree
um,
with that.
for him, like as a personal thing. And these are businesses; these are multi-billion-dollar organizations. They're not handing out major league opportunities just because. That being said, there are times, and actually the Cubs have been very good about doing these things, that instead
They
of
have.
DFAing somebody, they'll stick them on the 60 man so they get like their 10 years of service time.
Yep.
That was something that they did with, oh my gosh, the guy last year, one of the relievers.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember
Change
that.
up specialty. Oh my God. How am I not
Um,
Michael Fulmer? Oh my God.
did they do it
He,
for, with Brandon Kinsler?
no, that's not who I was thinking of, but same kind of
Oh,
profile.
yeah.
Okay, when he was in Arizona, he gave up the back-to-back home runs with Anthony Rizzo that tied the game and David Bodie for walk-off, and then former. Oh my God, I can't even
Oh,
believe
yeah. No, someone's
are
listening to this show and they're like, "How the hell can you not remember this
they've
name?"
they've run off the road. They're screaming obscenities. They're gonna drive to Omaha and knock on my door and be like, "How do you not remember this guy?" Um,
I'm with you. I can't remember him
it'll
either.
it'll
So,
come to me, but
regardless,
They
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 have
they
been good
used
about that.
yeah, they've been pretty good about that, and, like, honestly, a Jack Patterson kinda debut or that kind of thing, I think would be a really cool thing for doubleheader or whatever. I'm here for it. That's
Yeah,
all I'll say.
I agree with you. One more reliever. We've been talking a lot about relievers, but one
Yeah.
more guy I want to throw out there that it kind of falls probably closer to that first group of names rather than the second group of names, for sure. But I don't know if we'll see him this year. Frankie Scalzo Jr. deserves a shout
Hmm.
out. As just mentioning him, we might see him in Chicago. He'll start off the year in Double A Tennessee, and a reliever starting in Double A Tennessee. That's like a true he's one of the very few guys in the organization that are
Yeah.
true relief prospects that I can project long term is like seeing them impact Chicago for like multiple years. There's not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of true prospect like relief prospects that I can do that for. He's one of those guys.
Yeah. I could definitely see it.
All right, you want to transition away from relief pitchers that we just spent 20 minutes talking about? Okay.
Yes. Let's do that.
So, there is one more pitcher, not relief pitcher, that I want to mention here as to me absolutely a lock that we'll see in Chicago. Cade Horton. We're going to see Cade Horton this year, this
Yep.
summer. I think we can kind of we don't even have to pencil him in. We can take a Sharpie and write him on our list as far as a guy that will debut this year in Chicago.
Yeah. I think so. What you want to see is just him being healthy, and that's the biggest thing. But like, yes, if he is healthy and he's doing well, which there's no reason to think that he's not, he's going to be up in Chicago. I do think that the way the Cubs have organized their pitching staff, it makes it pretty obvious that not that they're pinning all their hopes on Cade Horton, but clearly they're going to give him a runway.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think we need to say much more about Cade because we just spent 20 minutes on relievers and we got 2 minutes on Cade, but like we've spent every episode over the offseason talking about Cade, so I think that he's good to go. All right, I've got, if you want to transition to hitters here, I've got one like clear cuts. And actually, the more I think about it, the less clear cut it becomes.
Okay.
But I'm going to throw Luis Vasquez in my kind of locks to debut. And the reason why I say like it's every day it seems less and less. It's because like you got Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson in the middle, right? After that, Miles Mastrobuoni, I think, still plays a pretty crucial role on this team in terms of a infield sub. I think that you likely have to see 2 injuries for Luis Vasquez to debut. Or just some kind of weirdness. We saw Luis Vasquez was that guy a few years back that was being shifted all around the organization. He was like a 21-year-old kid being shifted
Jumping
from
up to
high A to
AAA.
AAA. Yeah. So like I think the Cubs probably believe in him to be able to be called up for like a few days and then sit back down and feel totally comfortable with that. But I'm gonna go ahead and put Luis Vasquez in my predictions to debut this year. But like I think putting lock on it is probably a little bit too far.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually I'm less convinced he's going to come up. But I do think he would be a consideration, right? Like if Dansby rolls an ankle, you're probably just shifting Nico over. Kind of like what you said, you're going to need about 2 injuries to do it. So maybe I'm just rooting against that happening because I hope it doesn't. But yeah, and we've even seen Mastrobuoni actually shift over to shortstop in spring training games. Don't want to make too much of that, but like that might be your 3 shortstops on the roster. Maybe even Chris Morel, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I'm gonna guess no, but okay. I think I completely get your rationale.
What position players do you have your eyes on as far as debuting this year?
Brennen Davis.
I like it.
I really think that if he is healthy, they are going to give him a shot. That is your ideal, like, hey, he's going to come up, he's going to DH, he's going to play a little center field, probably some right field, left field, whatever. I think they're just going to give him the opportunity. The other thing too is that they can then be very judicious about not playing him every single game. And you want him to get at bats, but that kind of may just be better for right now, like because he hasn't played a lot of games. So like then let's not throw him into 150 games.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really considered that part of it. My thinking on Brennen Davis is that like I think it's going to be so dependent on the way do the Cubs still view. So if he's successful, and I don't mean like putting up a 130 WRC plus, I mean putting up like a 110 to 115 WRC plus. How do the Cubs want to treat him? Do they want to handle him like a top prospect? And in that case, I think he does not come up If they
Yeah.
still view him as a top prospect. I think it's in that case, it's let's get him at bats. Let's get him as many at bats
Mhm.
as possible in AAA. If they view him as we just want some sort of contribution from Brennen Davis, we don't expect him to be a starting caliber player in the major leagues anymore. If that's the case, then yeah, I don't think he needs to perform ridiculously well in AAA, and then he will get a call up to the majors. I think that like that's how they'll handle him. Is they'll just say we want something out of Brennen, not everything out of Brennen.
Yeah, I will pose, door 3, which is he may not have a future with the organization. This is not to knock Brennen Davis. I love
Mm,
Brennen Davis. They may see that he's got better opportunities at other organizations and use it a bit as a showcase. So he comes up, he gets some run at DH. He spells some of the outfielders a couple games, gives them a little bit of extra, you know, time to DH to get off their legs. Kind of in the heat of summer, we're sitting there in June. Give Brennen some starts, and then he can kind of go down to AAA and continue to work on and continue to grow, and they can evaluate whether he is a guy that he is, a long term, full time 2025 guy, or somebody that then gets their showcase in June, July. Then they make the decision at the trade deadline.
can I just say how funny online, Twitter specifically, was when Brennen Davis had, what was it, game 2 of spring training when he had a 2-run
Yes.
RBI. He had a home run in that game. Looked terrific, obviously, at the
Yep.
plate. And every, everybody's reaction online was, yes, we can trade him now. And
Yeah.
it was hilarious. It was so, and like, I'm not saying that it's not the best route to trade him. Like it might be for Brennen the best route to trade him. It might be for the Cubs. It might be for every situation involved. It might be best to trade him. But it was just hilarious to me that the reaction was, yes, he looks good. He looks back to like being a version of Brennen Davis. I can't wait to trade him now. And that was just that was funny to me. I don't know.
It is kind of crazy, the echo chamber sometimes. I personally, I don't want to trade Brennen Davis. But I do also long term want to watch Brennen Davis play 15 years in the majors.
Yeah.
And like sometimes that means just giving a guy a long runway somewhere. And if that means I'm driving down to the Kansas City Royals to watch him debut, I would,
Yeah.
like that's something like that. So yeah, but yes, that I did see that.
Um, is there anybody else that you kind of have? Because honestly, I don't have anybody else as like even close to locks, like you're close to even like predicting that they will debut.
Oh, no, definitely not locks. I will toss out one other name to at least consider as a guy that will be, you know, well, I'll do 2 people to at least consider.
Okay.
One that I
Yep.
think is a
I've
little
got a
bit
few
more
too.
likely.
Yep.
Christian Franklin.
Mm.
If they
Okay. I
decide
actually
not to
didn't
go,
have that. That's good.
yeah, in case they decide not to go like the Brennen Davis route or something like that, late in the season, if they need a center fielder and they don't truly want to play PCA, which that's the other thing here. If they want to call up somebody that is not guaranteed to get at bats every day, but
Mm-hmm.
strictly just to serve as like a late inning guy,
Mm-hmm.
a pinch runner, somebody that can, move around a little bit. Christian Franklin makes a lot of sense. He'll be Rule 5 eligible. That's probably a name to consider there.
Yeah.
Um,
I like that a lot.
yeah, the last one, I think we got to at least consider James Triantos.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's got a guy, and some people are probably freaking out, like, where the hell is Matt Shaw? And that's probably a good point. Were you going to bring him up?
Yeah, so I've got a handful more names just to bring up. Matt
Okay.
Shaw, I had Matt Shaw and James Triantos too.
Okay.
Same kind of situation with them. I think Matt Shaw is closer than James Triantos.
I think so too.
I
Yeah.
guess I have Shaw. The percent likelihood that Shaw debuts is higher to me than James Triantos. Um, I think some of that is I feel I don't know. I just think that his ability to impact the baseball is right now greater than James Triantos. Although James Triantos might end up doing it just as much as Shaw, but that's to be determined. I guess my point
Yeah.
is that I'm not predicting Matt Shaw will debut this year. I think that I expect him to not debut, but he's absolutely worth mentioning in this segment because when September rolls around, if the Cubs need a pick me up, if the Cubs are starting to kind of limp to the finish towards September, I think a guy who could really jolt some energy into him, I think Matt Shaw absolutely can do that.
Yeah, actually, I think I will toss out that I think Matt Shaw does debut down the
Okay. Yeah.
stretch, only in September. Um, a little bit as a reward, very similar to PCA in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that he doesn't need to come up, he doesn't need to play every game. And also, it'll be funny because there will be a segment of Cubs Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it then, or Y or Z or whatever the name it is at the time, uh, that people will be a little bit annoyed that he's not playing, but less annoyed and not mad at the manager, and insinuate something that if Matt Shaw isn't playing every game. But I think that it's a really good prep to make him potentially be, to really run with a role in 2025. So that's the only that's the reason I'll throw it out
Yeah,
there.
you know what? I think that's important because I think that my expectation is that Matt Shaw will be in the opening day lineup in
Yeah.
Chicago in 2025. And so I think if that's my full expectation, we
Mhm.
probably have to see something from him in Chicago this year. I'll come back to that. I think at the end we'll kind of run through like our
Yep.
our predictions. I'll come back to Matt Shaw because I'm really on the fence with Matt Shaw, super on the fence. Um, I want to mention a couple more outfielders here for sure. I've got Owen Casey worth
Mhm.
mentioning. And he's more of a, we talked about him before. I think that like that likelihood is pretty low, especially now with Cody. We already kind of covered that, but worth just throwing his name out there. And then another guy that I'm kind of viewing in the outfield the same way I'm viewing some of those relievers that are like, oh, like we can call him up and then kind of outright him off the 40-man roster, something like that. But I could see him making a debut this year is Darius Hill. Obviously, Darius Hill struggled last year. He was really good in 2022, struggled in Iowa last year in 2023. But like, exactly what Darius Hill is. Like,
Yep.
he is like a bat to ball guy that's not going to hit for power. He's not going to play great defense in the outfield, but he does have some speed. Darius Hill, he is what he is, and I think a major league team when you need a fifth outfielder for a week, that makes a lot of sense to call up a guy like Darius Hill. And then if we can transition to the infield here, I've got a couple names in the infield. One is
Mhm.
BJ Murray, which is BJ Murray that's an interesting case. We probably should have maybe mentioned him. I guess less with Cody, but it's with signing Cody. It's with bringing in Dom Smith. It's with bringing in Garrett Cooper on a minor league
Yep.
deal. I know that
Absolutely.
BJ Murray Jr. plays third base, but he also plays first base. He's a corner infielder, and I feel if I'm betting on him landing on a position, I'd probably bet on first base rather than third base,
Yeah.
hoping he lands on third. But like at this point, like I had BJ Murray Jr. penciled in for Iowa to start off the year, and at this point, it's like where's he gonna go? It might end up being back in Double A, which is rough.
Yeah, just I mean the roster's just really, filled out in AAA. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want him to get a bunch of at bats, although it's kind of tricky because you got Moises, who's probably going to play in Double A,
Yep.
and he's going to play some catcher, but he's definitely going to play some first base and he's
Mm-hmm.
going to play some DH. You've got Matt Shaw, who is probably going to get a whole ton of run at third base,
Yep.
maybe a little bit of second. Those are both positions that BJ Berry could play.
Mm-hmm.
You've got James Girantos, who's probably going to line up as your second baseman, but I
Yep.
guess could play a little third or whatever, some DH, maybe the outfield, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, you start filling out that Double A roster, and it looks really tough too. That being said, I think BJ Murray should carve out a role. He should be able to be in the lineup every game, or pretty much every game,
Somewhere.
regardless.
Yeah.
Uh,
Somewhere meaning some position and some level, right? Like
yes.
it's both physical location in the country and physical location on the field. What if I'm throwing this out to you as far as pre-September, who has the higher likelihood of debuting in Chicago, BJ Murray or Matt Shaw?
BJ Murray. Yeah, without a doubt. Because I think that if you're talking about a pre-September debut, you are likely in a situation, barring a really bad injury, multiple injuries, you're probably looking at somebody who you just want to come up,
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit of run, be totally fine going back down. Somebody that you can bring up where you're not worried about it derailing. a development plan.
And BJ Murray is that guy.
And BJ Murray's that guy.
Yeah. Chase Strumpf is another name that I have here.
Yep.
I think that he's a different player, but kind of similar situation to BJ Murray, except like more so in terms of like you call him up, you feel like you're not derailing anything, you feel like he can contribute in some way. I've said for a long time that Chase Strumpf is in so many ways he's Patrick Wisdom. I put on my Twitter thread of all the debuts in spring training that 2024 is a season-long tryout for Chase Strumpf to be some team's version of like Patrick Wisdom for the Cubs from 2021 to 2023, where like he can play for a team who's not as good, but play a role where like, hey, he has the pop, he walks like crazy, yeah, he strikes out 35% of the time, but like you can put up with that if you're a team that's kind of like pushing for the playoffs or like a below average team. You know what I mean? So, and I think that tryout might include a promotion up to Chicago if they need him.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it's very much like a Jared Young situation. I think Chase Strumpf's a better prospect, but somebody that you're just like, hey, you know what? We've got a role here, and we just need like right-handed hitting power.
Yeah.
Not like Jared Young, who obviously you want a different thing, but it's like perfect, great. Bring up Chase Strumpf, reward him, let him just get some at bats.
Yep. We've gone this long without mentioning any catchers, and I think that catchers you have to kind of mention a catcher because especially when one of your catchers in Chicago, well, when two of your catchers in Chicago, one is 37 is Young Gomes.
Yes, I think,
and
36,
the other one,
37.
The other one has been injured a lot in his minor league career.
Yeah.
So you're going to see catchers being promoted up to Chicago. Now, Joe Hudson might be that guy. Jorge Alfaro might be that guy. They've already debuted. They've already made their major league debuts. They're different. They don't fit this category. That leaves Bryce Wyndham, right? And I think that I kind of picture Bryce Wyndham as being catcher number 4 in terms of the organizational depth chart at catcher.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that's good. He got a opposite field single in spring training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've always kind of liked what I've seen from Bryce Wyndham. He can play multiple positions, got a good arm. The pitchers really love throwing to him. We need those Windy City shirts. I think that'd be a lot of fun. He very much could fit you bring him up, you end up having to DFA him. He stays in the organization. You bring him up again. You know, like that kind of role that we saw with some of those 3rd, 4th, 5th string catchers, and somebody that's still important and somebody that develops and gets major league opportunities.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other names you want to throw out there? We've covered a ton of them.
I guess Pablo Aliendo also is probably somebody to at least consider. He's somebody that, you know, he was probably somewhat on the cusp of the Rule 5 decision last year. I don't think he's ready, but I also don't think it's the craziest thing if he really takes a step forward and then all of a sudden you're late in the season and you kind of bring him up similar to like in a Miguel Amaya, and let him develop and see the major league role and just be kind of a third catcher. That wouldn't be the craziest thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. All right, man. Are you ready to make your final predictions here?
Ready to make my final predictions.
You want me to go first or you got it?
You go first. I'm counting them out.
All right. So I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8.5 here.
Okay.
So, and which goes back to how we led this off, right? Where 8 seems like the max, or right around the max. No more than 10 for sure. I've got Ben Brown. I've got Cade Horton.
Yep.
Bailey Horn, Zach Lee, and then one of the kind of older relief prospects. I'm not gonna define one of them. It'd be one of the Cam Sanders, Chris Clark, Eduardo Nunez, Hunter Biggie prospect. So that's 5 pitchers, and then I've got Luis Vasquez. I'm gonna stick with him. I'm gonna go Bryce Wyndham as the catcher.
Okay.
Give me Chase Strumpf. And then, right, that's 8. My half is Matt Shaw.
His top half or his bottom half?
just his quick hands.
Oh boy, which are half his body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why not? Give me Matt Shaw as number
Okay.
9. I'll say 9 debuts this year.
That's really annoying because I was totally going to go with 9 entering this whole conversation. Let me count it out here. So I am going to do something similar from the reliever perspective. Definitely going to go Ben Brown. I will go Cade Horton as well. Just toss him in there. I think
Yep.
that's your guy. We talked about Bailey Horn. I will go Riley Martin instead of Zach Lee.
Okay.
For one, just to be a little different, and two, I think the Cubs have just a ton of right-handed relievers that they can bring up. I think they have less left-handed relievers.
True.
So I will go with that. I will also go one of the older guys, similar to you, with a slight lean for the fun of it for Jack Patterson.
Okay. Yeah, I like it.
But one of those guys.
Yes. Yeah.
And then moving to, let's see here.
We got 5 pitchers at this point.
5 pitchers. Yeah, I think that's fair. I am going to go Brennen Davis.
Okay. Yep.
I am going to go Matt Shaw.
Yep.
This is really kind of.
Are you going with a catcher or no?
I'm not going to go with a catcher.
Okay.
And the reason being is you've got the Alfaro, Hudson.
Yep.
I think they're going to want to try to go,
Agreed.
vet catcher is the third one, but certainly open for that. And so how many is that?
You've got 7. You've got 7 right now. You haven't mentioned any besides Shaw, right? You haven't mentioned any. All right, Shaw and Brennen.
Yeah, Shaw and Brennen. I will toss out Christian Franklin.
Okay.
Because I think that's a good one. I think that would be fun.
Yep. You like BJ?
You know what? I am debating on this one. Just because it's me, just because it's fun. I'm hedging my bets a little bit. I will say James Triantos is
okay. Nice. I like it.
It's right about there. It's like about 9, I think.
Yeah. So you ended up with 9. We both have 9, which I think makes sense. I think it makes sense for where the Cubs stand in terms of competitiveness, where the Cubs stand in terms of the prospects they have in the upper levels. I think it all makes sense. I think having 9 I think it makes sense.
Yep.
All right, man. That's it. That's all we've covered. We fit everything within 67 minutes or so. So that's not too awful bad here.
That's not too bad. Things for people to watch out for.
Yes.
There was a really good article, I teased it, by Sahadev Sharma and Patrick Mooney at The Athletic. Those guys are cued in, and when they write stuff, you should pay attention, especially when they're very deliberate in how they're describing it and not giving the whole article away. But they definitely talk about the fact that the Cubs are trying to move a pitcher to make room for Cody Bellinger, whether that's done as, by the time they actually officially ink the deal with Bellinger, or if they, after a post DFA, they expect a trade to happen. That is definitely something to watch for there. We've talked a lot about some of these guys on the periphery. I would expect like a 40-man pitcher to get moved. So I think that's a ton of fun. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of stuff coming on Cubs on Deck. We're going to have a lot of stuff coming at Northside Bound. There's some great chats at the 1060 West Discord. There's an invite link that's open and available. If you want one, DM me, but it's out there as well. But I mean, this is a big month for us, man. I'll let you tease the rest of the stuff, but this is it's go time.
Yeah, we're officially in weekly Cubs on Deck episode mode, which is fun. That's terrific. This month of May, the next 4 weeks, we are going to be doing affiliate previews for all 4 Cubs full season affiliates. And we will do that with all of the broadcasters of the Cubs organization. So I think what we have set up right now, guys, don't hold me to this for sure, but I think the order of which we're doing this is we're going to start off with Mick Gillespie covering the preview of the Tennessee Smokies. Then we'll get into Max and BK for the South Bend Cubs. They will both be on the show with me. That'll be fun. And then we're going to do Sam Wiederhaft will be previewing the Myrtle Beach Pelicans with me after he comes back from Arizona. So that's super fun. And then Alex Cohen will be wrapping up the affiliate previews, which makes sense. Having AAA at the end, we never know what's going on as far as the players at AAA. So he will kind of wrap things up as far as affiliate previews at the end of the month of March. So, yeah, like I said, March is going to be crazy. We are officially back to weekly episodes after we do the 4-season previews, we're going to be seeing minor league baseball. By the time the Iowa Cubs preview will drop on a Tuesday, and I think that Friday is opening night for the Iowa Cubs. So yeah, we're back in action, full steam ahead, and it's going to be super fun this whole year. So and then obviously Zumach will be back with episodes. Brian Smith will be back with episodes. I'll get some of those rotating guests. I'm sure I'll get RM Layton on the show, guys like that. And we're gonna have fun this offseason, or this not offseason. We're gonna have fun this season. It'll be great.
That's right, man. And I went this entire podcast. I have to give you the massive shout out for having the Eugene Emeralds on your hat.
Yes.
Those are my boys. I don't even care.
And you got is that a bobblehead? What?
The Eloy Jimenez bobblehead.
Heck yeah.
They were doing a charity from a couple years ago. For folks that don't know, I lived 6 years out in Oregon, and a couple of those were out when the Eugene Emeralds were still the Cubs affiliate. It was soul crushing when they weren't, but those are my boys.
So. I had to rock I still have to rock it every once in a while, even though they're a Giants affiliate, not a Cubs affiliate. They still hold it. I mean, just hearing how much players and fans and everybody loved the Eugene Emeralds, I had to get the hat. I think I got the hat right before they stopped becoming a Cubs affiliate, so it hits a little bit harder.
Then.
It was me. Yeah, I got the hat, and they're like, oh, Greg has a Eugene Emeralds hat, no longer with the Cubs. Yeah,
I will hold you personally responsible. But Sluggo is their mascot, and he has been the teddy bear for both of my children. They love incredible. Sluggo. So that's incredible. Love me some Eugene Emeralds, just in case you're listening, Alan. Great work out there.
Shout out to the Emeralds. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode, and hopefully you guys join us for the entire month of March for our previews of the Cubs affiliates. It'll be fun. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in one short week.